It all began on a cold winter morning when I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. There they were, those first few wrinkles etched into my skin like cracks on an old painting. My heart sank. Panic surged through me as if I'd been struck by some invisible force that whispered, "You're no longer young." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Desperation clawed at my mind, and I became obsessed with hiding these signs of aging. I scoured the internet for solutions, spending thousands of dollars at a supposedly prestigious skincare clinic, only to discover later it was a scam. Their procedures left my skin red and irritated, a constant reminder of my foolishness. But worse than the physical scars were the emotional ones. Walking down the street one day, I overheard someone snicker about my prematurely silver hair. Their words pierced me like daggers. Society had turned its back on me, labeling me as someone who didn't fit their narrow definition of beauty. Nights became endless battles against myself, filled with tears and self-loathing. How could I ever accept this version of myself? It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss of despair. Yet somewhere deep inside, a flicker of defiance ignited. What if this wasn't the end, but the beginning of something greater? That tiny spark grew into a raging fire, pushing me to confront my deepest fears. Slowly, painfully, I started seeing my wrinkles not as flaws, but as stories written on the parchment of my life. Each line told tales of laughter shared, challenges overcome, and love given freely. This realization didn't come easily. It was born from months of anguish, but when it finally took root, it transformed everything. The morning after that fateful beach trip, I stood in front of the mirror, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. My skin, once my pride and joy, was now an angry red canvas of despair. The sun had scorched it mercilessly, leaving behind not just a painful burn, but also patches of raw irritation that made every touch feel like fire. How could I have been so careless in my haste to embrace the carefree spirit of summer? I'd forgotten the one thing I swore never to skip again: sunscreen. That single mistake became a cruel reminder of how fragile our bodies are, especially as we age. But this wasn't the first time my skin had betrayed me. It was merely the latest chapter in what felt like an endless saga of self-inflicted wounds. Just weeks earlier, I'd been standing in the skincare aisle at the drugstore, overwhelmed by rows of bottles promising miracles. Wrinkles? Gone. Dullness? Banished. Youthful glow? Restored. Desperate to cling to any semblance of youthful vitality, I grabbed a bottle labeled anti-aging serum without giving it a second thought or a patch test. Big mistake. Within days, my face erupted into a battlefield of cystic acne, each bump throbbing with indignation. It was as if my skin was screaming back at me for all those years of neglect and poor choices. Every glance in the mirror brought fresh waves of shame. I couldn't even bear to leave the house. Friends stopped inviting me out because they assumed I didn't want company, when really I wanted nothing more than to escape the prison of my own reflection. And then there was the incident with the luxury moisturizer, a product I'd splurged on after reading rave reviews online. The salesperson assured me it was perfect for sensitive skin, but within hours of applying it, my face swelled up like a balloon. Panic set in as I rushed to urgent care, where a doctor diagnosed me with a severe allergic reaction. He prescribed steroids to calm the inflammation, but no amount of medication could soothe the humiliation I felt. I spent days hiding under oversized sunglasses and scarves, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might recognize me. For someone who once prided herself on flawless skin, this sudden vulnerability shattered something deep inside me. Each of these disasters compounded the others, creating a perfect storm of insecurity and fear. When I looked in the mirror now, I didn't see the woman I used to be, the confident, radiant version of myself who laughed freely and walked tall. Instead, I saw a stranger staring back, her eyes shadowed with doubt and regret. Yet, amidst the chaos, a small voice whispered that perhaps this was exactly what I needed. Maybe losing control over my skin would force me to confront the deeper issues I'd been avoiding. The relentless pursuit of perfection, the refusal to accept change, and the desperate need for external validation. As I began piecing together a new skincare routine, one rooted in gentleness and patience, I realized that caring for my skin wasn't just about vanity anymore. It was about reclaiming ownership of my body and honoring its resilience despite everything it had endured. I started slow, incorporating hypoallergenic cleansers and fragrance-free moisturizers recommended by a trusted dermatologist. Each step felt like tending to a wounded animal, requiring immense care and compassion. And though progress was agonizingly slow, the tiny improvements gave me hope. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to imagine a future where my skin wasn't my enemy, but my ally. But healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. As I worked through the scars, both literal and metaphorical, I found solace in reconnecting with old friends who reminded me that beauty isn't skin deep. They told stories of their own struggles with aging, sharing laughter and tears over coffee. Their support became a lifeline, pulling me out of the darkness I'd let consume me. Together, we celebrated the wisdom etched into our faces, the strength reflected in our eyes, and the love written across our lives. The scars on my skin had barely begun to heal when another storm hit, one that originated not from the outside world, but from within my own body. It started subtly at first, a gnawing fatigue that no amount of sleep could erase, an inexplicable shortness of breath during activities I used to breeze through. Then came the diagnosis that shook me to my core, a cocktail of health issues stemming from years of poor dietary choices. My doctor's words echoed in my head like a death knell. Your body is paying the price for decades of neglect. Suddenly, the burgers and fries I once craved felt less like comfort food and more like poison coursing through my veins. And I realized too late that my reckless eating habits weren't just about indulgence. They were a reflection of how disconnected I'd been from my own needs. Each greasy meal was a rebellion against self-care, a desperate attempt to fill a void with temporary pleasure. But now, staring down the barrel of chronic illness, I knew I had to make drastic changes. The problem? Decades of ingrained habits don't disappear overnight. Every bite of kale or sip of green tea felt like punishment compared to the sugary highs I'd grown addicted to. I wanted to scream every time I passed by the bakery aisle, memories of warm pastries flooding back like ghosts haunting me. And then there was my family, family, the people I loved most who unintentionally made this journey even harder. When I announced I was adopting a healthier diet, they reacted as though I'd declared war on tradition itself. Family dinners became battlegrounds where guilt trips replaced laughter. "Why are you doing this?" my mother asked one evening, her voice trembling with frustration. as she watched me push away the lasagna she'd spent hours preparing. To her, it wasn't just food, it was love, connection, memories wrapped up in layers of pasta and cheese. How could I explain that loving myself meant saying no, even if it broke her heart? But nothing prepared me for the internal conflict, the constant tug of war between what my taste buds craved and what my body desperately needed. There were nights when I sat alone in my kitchen, tears streaming down my face as I stared at a plate of roasted vegetables, wishing I could trade them for the pizza I used to devour without a second thought. Was it worth it? Was trading flavor for longevity really going to bring me happiness? These questions haunted me, turning meals into minefields of anxiety rather than moments of nourishment. Yet amidst the chaos, something shifted. Perhaps it was desperation, perhaps survival instinct. But slowly, painfully, I began to see food differently. No longer was it merely fuel, it was medicine, armor, a lifeline to reclaiming control over my life. With each small victory, a salad enjoyed instead of a burger skipped, I felt a glimmer of hope. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, I clung to the belief that healing wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. The scars on my skin had barely begun to heal, and the battle with my diet was still raging when I decided it was time to take control of my physical health through exercise. It felt like the next logical step in reclaiming my body. But little did I know how grueling this chapter would become. My first attempt at regular exercise started with a burst of enthusiasm that bordered on recklessness. Determined to see immediate results, I pushed myself far beyond what my untrained body could handle. One fateful morning, while attempting an intense cardio session, I felt a sharp pain shoot through my knee, an injury that left me sidelined for weeks. The doctor's words echoed in my ears. You can't rush fitness. That moment shattered not only my momentum, but also my confidence. I was back to square one, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever be strong enough to try again. When the physical pain finally subsided, the mental struggle took center stage. Every day became a war between discipline and laziness. There were mornings when the alarm would ring at 6 a.m., and all I wanted to do was roll over and bury myself under the covers. The voice inside my head whispered cruelly, "Why bother? You'll never get anywhere." Convincing myself to lace up my sneakers felt like scaling a mountain. Some days I won the battle, others I lost miserably. But even on the days I showed up, progress seemed invisible. Weeks turned into months, and despite sticking to my routine religiously, the mirror reflected no change. My clothes still fit the same, and my energy levels fluctuated unpredictably. Doubt crept in like a thief in the night, stealing whatever shreds of motivation I had left. Was this all worth it? Had I wasted my time chasing something unattainable? To make matters worse, finding time to exercise amidst the chaos of work and life felt nearly impossible. As someone juggling deadlines, family obligations, and personal responsibilities, carving out even 30 minutes for myself often felt selfish, or worse, impractical. Late nights at the office left me too exhausted to move, while early mornings were consumed by errands and chores. On more than one occasion, I found myself sitting in my car after a long day, staring blankly at the gym bag on the passenger seat, tears streaming down my face. How could I possibly prioritize my own well-being when everything else demanded so much from me? But somewhere deep inside, a spark refused to die. Perhaps it was desperation, perhaps resilience, But slowly, painfully, I began to shift my perspective. Instead of viewing exercise as punishment or a means to an end, I started seeing it as an act of self-love. Each step, each stretch became a reminder that I deserve better, not perfection, but effort. I learned to celebrate small victories, walking an extra block, holding a plank a second longer, or simply showing up when every fiber of my being wanted to quit. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, these tiny triumphs gave me hope. Over time, something miraculous happened. What once felt like torture transformed into moments of peace. A brisk walk became meditation, a yoga class turned into therapy, and lifting weights evolved into empowerment. I realized that exercise wasn't just about changing my body, it was about healing my soul. This journey taught me patience, perseverance, and the importance of listening to my limits without letting fear dictate my choices. For the first time in years, I felt alive, not because I looked different, but because I felt different. The exhaustion from months of relentless insomnia had finally pushed me to the brink. It wasn't just fatigue, it was a suffocating fog that clouded every thought, every decision, and every interaction. I felt like I was drowning in my own mind, gasping for clarity but finding only chaos. Each night became a battleground, where sleep eluded me like a cruel phantom, taunting me with its absence. My body screamed for rest, yet my mind refused to surrender, replaying endless loops of worries about work deadlines, health issues, and life's mounting pressures. The harder I tried to quiet my racing thoughts, the more they spiraled out of control. By morning, I was left hollow, dragging myself through another day on sheer willpower alone. It wasn't long before the toll became unbearable. At work, tasks that once seemed effortless now felt insurmountable. Deadlines loomed ominously, each one feeling like an impossible mountain to climb. My performance plummeted, and with it came sharp words from colleagues and supervisors who couldn't understand why someone as capable as me suddenly seemed so broken. Meanwhile, my physical health deteriorated rapidly. My skin looked sallow, my energy vanished, and even simple activities left me breathless. Every glance in the mirror revealed a stranger staring back, gaunt, defeated, and desperate. But the worst part? The nights. Oh, how I dreaded the nights. As soon as darkness fell, anxiety tightened its grip around my chest, squeezing until I could barely breathe. Would tonight be another sleepless abyss, another marathon of tossing and turning, watching the clock tick mercilessly toward dawn? The weight of knowing I needed sleep, but couldn't achieve it, was crushing. Each hour that passed felt like a betrayal, both by my body and by fate itself. Tears streamed down my face as I lay there, trapped in this prison of wakefulness, while the world outside slumbered peacefully. Yet amidst the torment, something shifted. A faint voice inside whispered that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to fight this battle alone. Seeking help wasn't weakness, it was survival. That realization sparked a tiny flame of hope, a lifeline I clung to as I began rebuilding my relationship with sleep. Slowly, painfully, I learned to trust the process again. And though the scars of those sleepless nights remain, they remind me of how far I've come and how resilient I truly am. The weight of everything I had been carrying, my damaged skin, my erratic diet, my sleepless nights, and the relentless pressure to exercise finally crashed down on me like an avalanche. It wasn't just stress anymore. It was a suffocating storm that had left me gasping for air. The days blurred into one another, each filled with mounting responsibilities and unrelenting expectations. At first, I tried to push through, convincing myself that this was just part of life. But the cracks began to show in ways I couldn't ignore. One fateful afternoon during a high-stakes meeting at work, something inside me snapped. My voice trembled as I presented a critical report, and when a colleague questioned my data, panic surged through me. I lashed out uncontrollably, my words sharp and unfiltered, leaving everyone stunned, including myself. That moment became a turning point, a stark reminder of how unchecked stress could unravel even the strongest among us. As the fallout from that incident settled, I found myself spiraling further into despair. Sleep eluded me more than ever, my mind racing with replays of the confrontation. Every small decision felt monumental, every task insurmountable. Friends noticed the change but didn't know how to help. "You need to relax," they'd say, their advice feeling hollow against the tidal wave of anxiety consuming me. Meditation, useless. Deep breathing exercises, futile. Even yoga, once my sanctuary, now felt like another burden I couldn't bear. Each failed attempt at relief only deepened the chasm between who I wanted to be and who I had become. But the worst was yet to come. A few weeks later, while juggling multiple deadlines, I completely lost control. In a fit of exhaustion and frustration, I stormed out of the office midday, leaving behind unfinished projects and bewildered coworkers. As I sat alone in my car, tears streaming down my face, I realized I was teetering on the edge of a breakdown. My body ached, my chest tightened, and my thoughts spiraled into darkness. How had it come to this? Had I pushed myself too far, too fast? The questions swirled endlessly, offering no answers, only more despair. In the days that followed, I retreated from the world, overwhelmed by shame and self-doubt. Yet amidst the chaos, a flicker of clarity emerged. Perhaps this collapse wasn't just a failure, it was a wake-up call. Stress hadn't defeated me, it had forced me to confront the unsustainable pace I'd set for myself. Slowly, painfully, I began piecing together a new approach. Instead of trying to conquer stress, I started listening to it. I journaled my fears, sought therapy, and allowed myself moments of vulnerability without judgment. These steps weren't immediate fixes. They were tiny lifelines pulling me back from the brink. Eventually, I learned to embrace imperfection, to let go of the illusion that I needed to have everything under control. What mattered most wasn't perfection, but resilience. And though the scars of those dark days remain, they remind me of how far I've come, a testament to the strength we discover when we dare to face our breaking points head on. The loneliness crept in like a thief in the night, stealing away pieces of my soul one by one. First, it was Sarah, my childhood best friend, who moved across the country for work, her calls growing fewer and farther between until they stopped altogether. Then came the death of Uncle Joe, whose laughter had always been the soundtrack of our family gatherings. Each loss felt like another brick being pulled from the fragile wall I'd built around myself, leaving me exposed and vulnerable to the biting winds of isolation. But nothing prepared me for the betrayal that followed. A close friend I trusted with my secrets shared them cruelly during an argument, twisting my words into weapons against me. The pain cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. As if these blows weren't enough, tensions at home reached a boiling point when my siblings accused me of favoritism toward our aging mother. Voices rose, accusations flew, and what was once a loving family dynamic shattered into shards of anger and resentment. I found myself sitting alone in the living room afterward, staring blankly at the photo albums scattered on the coffee table. Images frozen in happier times now mocking me with their unattainable joy. How had everything unraveled so quickly? My heart ached not just from the absence of those who were gone, but also from the strained relationships still lingering nearby. The anxiety over maintaining social connections became suffocating. Invitations dwindled as life's demands pulled people in different directions, and I feared no one would notice or care if I simply faded away. Nights turned into endless battles against despair, wondering whether anyone truly understood the depth of my loneliness. Would I spend the rest of my days trapped in this quiet solitude? Yet amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope emerged. One evening, while scrolling through old messages, I stumbled upon a group chat from college friends planning a virtual reunion. Hesitant yet desperate for connection, I joined. Their laughter echoed through my screen, reminding me of simpler days. It wasn't perfect, it couldn't replace what I'd lost, but it reignited something within me. The belief that human connection, even imperfect, is worth fighting for. Slowly, painfully, I began reaching out again, rebuilding bridges burned by time and misunderstandings. And though scars remained, they served as reminders that healing begins with courage. And sometimes all we need is one brave step toward reconnecting. When I decided to pursue my passion for painting, I thought it would be the beginning of a beautiful chapter in my life. Instead, it turned into one of the darkest storms I'd ever faced. My first attempt at showcasing my work ended in humiliating failure. A local gallery rejected my pieces, calling them amateurish and lacking depth. The words stung like knives, leaving me questioning whether I was foolish to even try. But that was only the start of my unraveling. At home, tensions flared when my family dismissed my dreams as impractical. "You're too old to chase hobbies," my father snapped during dinner one evening, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Focus on something real." Their lack of support felt like a betrayal, cutting deeper than any critic's harsh review. As weeks passed, life's responsibilities piled up, bills to pay, health issues to manage, and the pressure became suffocating. I found myself standing at a crossroads, torn between reason and desire. On one side stood stability, sticking to routines, meeting expectations, and playing it safe. On the other was the fiery pull of my passion, whispering promises of freedom and fulfillment. Each day felt like a battle, a relentless tug of war between what society demanded and what my soul craved. Eventually, the weight of reality crushed me. With a heavy heart, I packed away my brushes and canvases, convincing myself that survival mattered more than self-expression. The void left by abandoning my art consumed me. Nights were endless cycles of regret and longing, while days dragged on under the shadow of monotony. It wasn't just about losing a painting, it was losing a piece of self, a source of light in an otherwise dim existence. Yet, amidst this crisis, something inside refused to die completely. A small voice whispered that perhaps passion couldn't be extinguished. It could only be postponed. So slowly, painfully, I began sneaking moments back into my life, sketching in secret, experimenting with colors late at night when no one was watching. These tiny acts of rebellion reignited a spark within me, reminding me that some parts of ourselves are worth fighting for, no matter how daunting the odds.